Hope and Patience with Amelia Rope, a podcast about business, well-being and chocolate.
Hello and welcome to Hope and Patience. It's me, Amelia Rope, the podcast creator and your host. If you're new to Hope and Patience, thank you for tuning in. Every episode, I'll be joined by inspirational souls who will share their stories and precious insights. You'll find the podcast is an exploration. It's about discovery. It's about finding balance between running a business and remembering your well-being. And now, Harriet Hastings from the Biscuiteers. Harriet is a remarkable woman, as you're about to find out, and it's a real treat to have her with us on Hope and Patience today. She is most definitely a doer and a multitasker, co-founder with her husband, Stevie, managing director of the stunning hand-iced biscuit gifting company, Biscuiteers, co-director of the catering company, Lettuce, managing director of the Women's Prize for Fiction, and she's an author, and add to the mix, she's a mother of 4 too. Would you share with us where it all began and why biscuits, and whether you had a backstory of self-starters in your family?
Well, I suppose it was my husband, in a sense. He was the self-starter because he started Lettuce. Many, many years ago. He's had Lettuce for sort of 30 years, which is now, in fact, run by my daughter, interestingly, so it's been passed on. But what happened with me was that I had 4 children and I was doing quite a sort of big job in marketing and PR. And I just decided, a bit like your intro, that I wanted a bit more control over my life and just to sort of rethink. So I gave up that job and then I just had this idea, really, because Stevie was obviously working in the kind of food and hospitality sort of area. And I just saw this real opportunity in food gifting. And it was that idea. And then out of that, I just sort of started to think, well, what could I come up with which would be a more interesting, more personalised, more kind of exciting way to gift? And that's sort of how it started.
So it was quite strategically set up. It was planned.
Yeah. A lot of people, most people, say to me, oh, you must have been a great baker and you love baking. And I guess that's what people want to hear. That's not really. And actually, sometimes I find that quite a misogynistic approach. I feel that they wouldn't ask a man the same question. I was a businesswoman, really, and I could see that there was this kind of explosion in the food gifting sector, or potentially there was. And I wanted to work out how I could come up with something which would be a genuine alternative to chocolates and flowers.
And back in 2007, when you set up, the landscape for women in business was definitely different from it is now. Did you find it challenging with funding or getting support, or with having your husband as co-founder? Did it sort of do the yin and yang bit?
Well, what I did, and I guess this is my advantage, because we sort of incubated it out of Lettuce. So we already had kitchens, commercial kitchens. And so I sort of was able to kind of experiment initially. I mean, there was some investment in packaging and brand and those kind of areas, but relatively we did it ourselves. So we didn't do it initially with outside investment. So I didn't really have to confront. And actually, looking back on it, I think I was just sort of blindly positive about it. When I thought about it afterwards, I thought, goodness, if it hadn't worked, that would have been quite a thing, because we were self-financing it.
Yes, it's a big commitment, especially with all your children. But why? I used to get asked when I was running my chocolate business of why chocolate, why biscuits.
I wanted it also to be a design business, which it is, because I saw that there was also an opportunity in the corporate commercial world for sort of branded gifting, and I mean it was just a happy accident, really. We were in New York and I saw some iced biscuits in a bakery in New York, and I just went, oh my god, that's exactly what I'm looking for. Something that biscuits are just brilliant. They have long shelf life, you can post them, and in design terms they're just they're limitless, really.
And they are, as a little sort of side thing that you've got, if you haven't seen the Biscuiteers website, you really must see it. It's won numerous awards, as has Harriet. I forgot to put that in the intro, but Harriet has won incredible awards. One of them was the Every Woman Award, the Aphrodite Award.
That's right, yeah. 2019.
So with your business, I came across a lot of challenges in my business, but the first thing that raises its head to me is how do you get so many people hand icing all these biscuits how does it work, manpower wise, staffing wise?
Well, it's very different now to how it was when we started. It is the challenge of the business, which is that, in a sense, what we're doing is we're scaling a business that is essentially artisanal. And I think a lot of people were skeptical about our ability to scale that, but we've really developed our own manufacturing techniques as we've gone along. I mean, we've literally designed the equipment. We've worked out how you do it because, we hand ice probably over 2 million biscuits a year now.
Wow.
So, inevitably, and actually recently we've moved, which has made just the most extraordinary difference. And it's taken us 12 years to get there, but we've moved into a sort of purpose, built sort of branded production space in Wimbledon now. So, and that means that for the first time, I've got everybody who works in the business in one place. And that's just been a transformational experience.
That must help a lot with logistics. Yeah. So that's where you would do online everything, warehouse, fulfillment, the works.
Everything, and sales, marketing, the whole piece. It's all in one place now.
How many people do you have working for you?
It slightly varies at time of year, somewhere between 130 and 150.
Oh my gosh. To me, I just sort of see PAYE, NIC, employers' costs and everything. I mean, it's a massive responsibility.
It is a big responsibility, and I think it's one of the things I think is quite important is try not to get sort of overwhelmed by that, and so I don't. Oddly, when we moved into this one space, I did actually think about it a bit more because when everybody worked in sort of 4 different places, I didn't actually see everybody together, so I didn't really have to confront that, and then I was like, oh my God, this is really quite serious now.
It certainly is. So was it challenging setting up the new, what do you call it? Would you call it a production unit, or because
we actually call it the Ministry? We actually call it the Ministry of Biscuits.
Ministry of Biscuits. So how, to get all the right equipment, because presumably you need you've got artisanal equipment in a way, but you're doing a large scale. Is that?
Yes, I mean it's there are different parts of the business. Obviously, there's a sort of bakery side, and cutting side, and that sort of thing, and then there is the icing part of it. But there are it is in the end it's about at Christmas I think we've probably had 70 or 80 icers working full time. So it is sort of one side of the year. Christmas is a big thing for us.
Is that what do you find the most sort of challenging aspect of it, or is it too difficult to say it's one thing? I mean,
I think those challenges change as you go through your kind of business cycle and as your business gets bigger. And I would certainly say that for most businesses, that high growth businesses, cash is always the thing that you have to be most worried about.
But you did a fundraising on crowdfunding, didn't you?
That was a few years ago.
Yeah.
That was the first time we'd raised any cash for the business, and we chose to do it through a crowdfunding campaign. And that was quite a transitional moment as well. I think bringing in external investors into the business, it was good. It created a kind of focus for what we were doing and a sort of increased structure. And also brought people into the business who have been immensely helpful. I mean, you can't do this on your own. I think that's probably what I'd say. I mean, both in terms of you need a fantastic team of people to work with, but you also need the right advice at the right time, depending on where you are in your kind of business cycle.
So what do you think your most memorable, because the podcast is about looking at challenges and how founders cope with them. What do you think the most memorable challenge has been, and what have you learnt from it that you would do differently now?
One that springs to mind that started very early on was that we created this concept for this business. We designed the products, we put up a website, we promoted it, and the orders started to come in actually because we were the first business in the UK to ever do anything like this. So we had all the first mover advantage. Anyway, we started sending out the biscuits and basically they all broke.
Oh no.
And it became clear that our packaging solution was not, and I literally went, oh my God, this might mean that I haven't got a business. My entire business idea is based on being able to, it's a gifting business. It's all about getting gifts to people on the right day at the right time. And anyway, we solved that problem. And we, in fact, now what we do is the biscuits are actually sort of glued into down with the icing, so they're actually positioned so they don't move in the tins.
Oh, that's really clever.
So now it's a very small problem, and not if a problem at all, really. But that was a kind of moment where you go, oh my goodness, we would never do that now. We did not test this in the way that we should have done before we launched it. We just jumped straight in. But even with that experience, I'm still not sure that isn't the right thing to do when you start businesses. I mean, starting businesses is absolutely about jumping in and finding out what works and what doesn't work. And it's when you've got a model that you're confident of and you've got a market, that's when you can actually, put your foot on the accelerator.
Yeah, I think people have just got to dive in. I mean, otherwise you could hang around for ages and never get anywhere. And I think you learn on the hoof as such. So what do you think now the greatest challenge is, potentially sort of with your business, but also in business as a whole for people starting up? What do you think the greatest challenge is from now we're to 2020 and you set up in 2007, so it's a massive change we've been through.
I think it's quite a difficult question because I think the challenges of businesses are very, very depending on I started a consumer business and a manufacturing business, which I would say was a combination of some of the most difficult types of businesses you can start. So I think when I look back, I will probably be proudest of having set up a manufacturing business. That has been a really interesting thing. And that's where my husband's been enormously helpful because I'm really a sales and marketeer. That's me. And, I do the production, the sales, the marketing. But it is a logistically huge thing, to be running something on that scale, but also very interesting actually, because as I said, we do all our own fulfillment. We make everything that we sell more or less. We design everything that we sell. So it's really, it's a rounded business in the whole. We're seeing it from kind of beginning to end. And I have found that very, it's been a really interesting experience.
Is it having your husband as co-founder and obviously living with and everything else, is that a challenge in itself, that you're sort of 24-hour partners?
I think it is a challenge, actually. I'm always amazed because there are plenty of other kind of husband and wife couples who run businesses, and they all say, "Oh, it's amazing," and we're really disciplined, and when we go home, we don't talk about the business. And I'm like, God, I have no idea how you do that. I mean, we have no discipline, and that's part of the problem. So if we're on a car journey or whatever, and we start talking about the business, and it is quite unhealthy sometimes, because he also runs his own business. I'm running a business, and it has sort of absorbed our family life at times, perhaps more than it should have done. But equally, it's given me enormous amounts of flexibility in the way that I live my life and run my working life.
And how old are your children? I mean,
well, they're when I started it, they were quite small, but now the youngest is 15, and the oldest, the one who's actually working in my husband's business, is 27.
Wow.
Yeah.
So do you find that one of you is an optimist and one of you is a pessimist? Or
yes, we have very different approaches, and the way we deal with that is that we do different. We try, and what we do is separate our roles in the business quite clearly. And I am an optimist, and I think you have to believe, you have to keep believing all the time in both in your product and your market, and it's going to work, and he's probably more cautious, but that's quite a good balance, I think.
Really good balance. So we are going to actually, before we're going to have our little chocolate break, which I can't wait for. That is sort of itching to open the chocolate. Have you got a tip for our listeners, maybe about coping with challenges and how to address them?
I mean, I think it's really important to be very decisive in businesses, and almost the worst thing you can do is sit on the fence. I mean, that's what entrepreneurs are, I often think. There are people who have to make lots of decisions all the time and be prepared to back their decisions. And I think, therefore, I tend to sort of, step back into, okay, let's weigh the option, be very logical about it. On balance, this should work out. And I find that's quite a useful way to take the emotion out, because it can be very emotional as well. The whole thing is a very emotional journey. Starting your own business, you're creating something that it's your own thing. It's like another child, sometimes to some people, and you have to be quite careful. And I think particularly as your business gets bigger, you have to learn how to manage that a bit.
That's a very good insight for us all to learn from. So it's time for the chocolate break, which is the most exciting bit. And Harriet's pick of chocolate is something that I haven't tried before, actually. It's the Lindtor milk chocolate bar. And I was just doing a bit of exploration on Lindtor, and apparently it means a sweet gold. And the door is the French for the gold. What is quite interesting for anyone listening who isn't into chocolate, you do chocolate in your business as well, don't you?
We do, actually. We ice chocolates, yes.
Ice chocolates, there you go. Is that Rudolf and August Lindt were the people who created the melt-in-the-mouth sensation with chocolate by creating the process of conching. So that's just a little chocolate fact for you. So what I'd like to know, Harriet, is why we are allowed to be tucking into this. What is the connection with you and this bar of chocolate?
Well, when I was a child, my mother used to put a bar of this chocolate in my stocking every year. And it was a huge sort of luxury. And I know that the sort of Lindtor balls are sort of in every petrol station now and seem very ubiquitous. But at the time, as far as I can remember it, this was a little bit of, melt-in-the-mouth luxury at Christmas. So and it always reminds me of her, so that's why I like it.
That's a wonderful story. And this is very sweet, isn't it? Real little fix. It's nice for first thing in the morning. Just a couple of words that I find that are used a lot, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on them. What do you think defines an entrepreneur or a small business owner or just a startup founder?
Well, I think one of the most important things about being an entrepreneur is, by definition, is that you're looking to do things a bit differently. So I think that should almost be like the default setting. An entrepreneur, in a sense, is a bit of a disruptor. Whether they go into an existing business or they create a new concept for a business, that seems to be the thing that often defines successful entrepreneurs, that they find a better way of doing it, a new way of doing it. So, and I think that sort of challenging thinking is something that can really help you in your business. So not thinking what's the way this has been done before, but thinking, could I do this a bit better? Could I find another way to, approach this? And I think if you can kind of train yourself into that kind of entrepreneurial challenging thinking, it's a really useful skill.
It's fresh thinking, isn't it? The one of the people I love, in fact, the book that I'm recommending at the end of this show is by Arianna Huffington. And she talks about her physical collapse in her business, or a physical collapse of herself in 2007. And she said that it made her question success and the meaning of success. What does success mean to you? I
think success has to be, for me, it is a sort of broader. It's much broader than the success of my business. In terms of my business, what I want is a happy place that people enjoy working in, and also I want to create a brand that has some kind of legacy. Those are the interesting things, the things that interest me about it. But I think success, is sort of not meaningful unless you can balance that with it, success and balance in other parts of your life.
And the word failure is, I hate the word failure because it makes you think of school, because I used to fail my exams. It's like failed. But how do you perceive failure? And do you see an optimistic side of failure?
I think that fear of failure is a driver for me, if I'm honest. And I think quite often it is. And that's it keeps you, and also I find it quite helpful in a way, because actually what you also I very strongly feel is that you can't afford to be complacent. I'm never complacent, that my business will continue to grow, that, that people will love it as much as they did, that you've got to keep working at it. And I think you've got to keep working at your product, you've got to keep working at your marketing, you've got to keep working. And I think you need that kind of constant drive, and fear of failure is quite often a sort of useful, I can't...
kick up the backside.
Yeah, kick up the backside for me, you know. So I think people approach it in kind of, different ways. Having said that, I equally believe that to fail in small ways in business is, obviously not your business to fail, but it's much better to fail and learn. It's much better to take a decision than not take a decision at all, is really what I mean. So obviously within a business, there's sort of small failures as you go along, but hopefully those are things that, make you stronger.
So moving on to my image of interviewing people is like a sandwich, I suppose, because I'm a foodie. So I see bread, filling, bread. So the final bit of bread in this is to look at the vital area that we require to thrive, which is the wellbeing side of things. Because I certainly found when I was running my business, at times I took my foot off that pedal and it really affected me. So I wanted to know if you were happy to share with the listeners how stress can affect you.
It makes me irritable, is how it affects me, and impatient. But I'm sort of aware of that a bit more. I try to be a bit more aware of it. And I wouldn't say that you sort of totally succeed. I think that, exercise things are really important. I think just, trying to do that, even if it's, going for a walk or, going for a swim or, I bicycle to work, which I find, unless it's absolutely pouring with rain, which I find really helpful because actually it's just being outside and being active before you come into work and after you leave is a good kind of,
so the wellbeing side is important to you.
Yeah, and I think I don't take it so much for granted now. Now that as you get older, I don't take it so for granted that you have to put more effort into doing that. So I do actually put quite a lot of effort into it.
I know that is the real shame. When you're young,
yeah.
you just don't. You don't.
I don't think I did anything in my 30s at all. Actually,
and now it's like, right, I've got to exercise. I've got to drink loads of water. I've got to eat really healthily. I've got to because it's that thing where I think as you get older, you want to live longer.
Yeah,
in a way.
Have you seen that bossy app that people have on their computers telling them to jump up and run around the desk and drink a glass of water? It's like,
I haven't, but perhaps that's what I should have. I'm finding though that with my new lifestyle as doing the podcast, is that it's really sedentary, and I'm fidgety. I like moving around, and so I've bought myself some weights that I sit at my desk working out. So to try and do some form of exercise. What won't you compromise to maintain your well-being? What would you absolutely say? No, I've got to go on my bike, or no, I've got to go for a walk, or I've got to go for a swim.
Fun enough, my biggest thing I won't compromise is actually try and remember is that I started my own business very much for that flexible, I want to spend time with my family reasons. And I still have a daughter who is still school age and has, some holidays and we spend quite a lot of our time in Suffolk. So for instance, in some holidays, I move my office base to Suffolk. I do come back to London, but I sort of changed, and even though as the business has got busier and it's got bigger, and I sort of feel the benefits happily of sort of Skype and things just about make it possible. But I really hang on to that because I just feel, well, that's why I did it. That's why, running your own businesses can be quite challenging. So the fringe benefits are supposed to be that you can actually work flexibly and make it work for you. So I've really tried to hang on to that, and that's an area I don't compromise on very much.
And do you have a little daily ritual for your well-being at all?
Well, I suppose when I'm biking, I listen with one headphone in. So every day I'm not too aggressive. Just one. Because I can hear out the other ear. I listen to loads of podcasts and, I like speech, bit of Radio 4, bit of podcasts. I listen to that.
Okay, so that leads me on to one more question in this sort of area, which is the digital overload, the constant thing of, the phone and computers, laptops, everything going TV. A question that I'm intrigued by is, do you switch your phone off at night when you go to sleep?
No, I don't. But I don't look at it. I read a lot. Actually, I didn't mention that, but you said earlier, I'm also the managing director of the Women's Prize, which is something I've done for 25 years. And so I do read a lot, and I find reading probably the most important mental switch off. So I read most nights before I sleep. And
read a physical book?
I do sometimes read Kindles, but mostly I read physical books because I prefer them. But for me, the imaginative life, I read a lot of fiction, and that sort of reading life is probably the most important way in which I switch into other things. I think it's quite important not to go. I do not want to go to sleep thinking about my day-to-day, business
Biscuits.
Problems. Biscuits, yeah.
So, Harriet, if there's a book that you could recommend our listeners, what book would you pick?
I've got a lot of favourite books, so I always find this a really difficult question. But one set of books that I have gone back to and I've read at different stages of my life and got different things out of them are Elizabeth Jane Howard's Cazalet Chronicles. I think she's a great writer, and I read them when I was very young, and I was basically at that time I was relating, I think, to the younger characters in the book, and I read them much later, 20 years later, and I found that I read the books in a completely different way and saw it very much from the perspective of the sort of older characters in the book. And I think that's just the sign of a really good book, when you can revisit it at different times in your life and get different things out of it.
Do you have a favourite hideaway? I know people are reluctant to share their hideaways in case everybody rushes off there and the hideaway disappears. But do you have a favourite hideaway where you would go to, or you and your family would go to? Or
yeah, I mean, it is very much. It's more than for me. It's more than a geographical space. It's an emotional space, which is, we've had a house in North Suffolk for a very long time now, and we go there at weekends and we go there at holidays. And I think it's, when I say it's an emotional space, it's because it was very much where I feel I brought up my children. When we're in London, everybody's at school and at work and rushing around. And so because we were always sort of on holiday or on weekends, it just became a really important place for all of us. It's quite nice. My more grown-up children come back now for weekends, and, they bring their friends. I feel different when I'm there. I feel like I sort of just, my life just goes down a couple of notches. And I find that really helpful.
You can recharge. So would you share with our listeners, there's a bit of sharing coming, one time where you've had to have dollop loads of hope?
Yeah, I mean, I did have a situation, oddly, around the time that I was starting the business, where one of my children was very unwell for quite a protracted period of time. And that was very difficult, obviously. But I think also what I learned out of that experience is that, your role in that, I guess, is to be, determinedly to take your child through that experience as much as you can, and to always be sort of optimistic and hopeful and on the front foot. And, also I think that, in a way, running a business just requires an enormous amount of conviction, because you have to sort of inspire that conviction in all the people around you. So that's quite an important part of it.
You've been absolutely amazing, Harriet. Before you go, though, do you have any new collections? Where can we buy your hand-iced biscuits? They are just so divine. So,
well, I mean, we sell at biscuiteers.com, open 24 hours a day. We also have 2 icing cafes in London, one in Notting Hill and one in Northcote Road, where you can not only buy the biscuits, you can learn to ice the biscuits.
Oh, I think I'll have to book in.
And then we are also, you'll find us in sort of, some of the big department stores, Selfridges, Harvey Nichols, those sort of places as well. I mean, we are now, because it's nearly Valentine's Day. So our Valentine's collection is available. And then after that, one of our biggest occasions actually is Mother's Day. So it's actually the second biggest occasion after Christmas.
Is it? Interesting. But you can buy Harriet's yummy biscuits any time of the year and gift like crazy. Anyway, thank you, Harriet, so much for being my second guest. I have really enjoyed myself. It's been the most superb interview. You've shared so much. It means a lot to me. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, I nearly forgot book recommendation and the quote at the end of the show. So my book recommendation is Arianna Huffington's Thrive. It's just the most incredible book. And when I was going through quite a challenging time in my business, I found it really helped me. It helped me in the way of being grateful for things and writing down 10 things at the end of my day that I felt grateful for. And it made me listen to birds singing and look at the sky, and it gave me a bit of zest. So I'd really recommend it. The quote is going to come out of the book, and it's a quote from a guy called Ian Thomas. I have to say I don't know who Ian Thomas is, but anyway, here we go. And every day the world will drag you by the hand, yelling, this is important, and this is important, and this is important. You need to worry about this and this and this. And each day it's up to you to yank your hand back, put it on your heart and say, no, this is what's important. In the book, you will find, as I think I've mentioned in the podcast actually, but Arianna really had to rethink her life when on the morning of April the 6th, 2007, she was lying on the floor of her home office in a pool of blood. And that made her really, sort of reassess her life. So do read it. It's a phenomenal book. And it's something that sits in my bookshelf and gets pulled down when I need it. And finally, I was thinking this week about the word drivers and what makes us want to do our own gig or think about doing our own gig. And some people's drivers are massive, life-changing. Others are gentler. I know that when I set up my chocolate business in 2007, one of the drivers to do it was that I had been trained as a PA. That was my sort of qualification. And I adore my father, who I hope will be tuning in and listening, but I really needed to prove to him that I was capable of doing something. I was capable of potentially earning a good salary. Well, okay, but just that I could be who I wanted to be. So that was a major driver. And now my driver has changed because I've evolved out of chocolate and I've set up the podcast business. And my driver is more about creating a community where we can care and share, because I don't have that personal driver. I don't have that thing gnawing at me because I've done it. I've proved to him, I proved to myself that I could do it. So I would love to hear about your drivers and what really is the reason why you're setting up your own gig or why you set up your own gig. I know that reading in a paper this week, they say that the driver for women to set up their own gig is to choose the work that they want to do and also for a better work-life balance. And for guys, they were saying that they were motivated by a prospect of earning more and choosing the work. But do you think they are the drivers? So just ping me an email via the website and let's get a discussion going and maybe we can talk about it in one of the shows with a guest. Thank you again so much to Harriet for joining me and to you, the listener, for finding us. I'll be back with another story soon, so make sure you subscribe to get the latest episode. And if you like what you hear, feel free to give us a positive rating and spread the word. I would also love to know what you'd like to hear more of, less of, and importantly too, none of. Just let me know via the website. So until next time, keep that sparkle. Bye.
Hope and Patience with Amelia Rope. Join the conversation at hopeandpatience.co.uk or find Amelia on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter @Hope and Pat.